Step onto the dry lake bed and you're standing on a chemistry problem that learned to fly. The sediments here aren't inert. For a century, rivers delivered trace metals from upstream mines, refineries, and soils. In a healthy lake, those settle, bind, and sit under brine. Lower the water, crank up salinity, and then desiccate the surface, and the bonds weaken, crusts form, and the inventory starts waiting for wind. What's in the mix? Arsenic shows up first in the headlines, but it travels with company, mercury, selenium, and other legacy metals concentrated by evaporation. In the South Arm, where the shrinking shoreline exposes microbialite reefs and mudflats, salts knit into a fragile crust. It looks solid. It is. A freeze, thaw, a tire track, one misjudged ATV ride, and the plate fractures. What nobody knew at the time is how fast that break can scale. Once a patch opens, the next storm can pluck it clean and carry it miles. The physics are simple and cruel. As exposure grows past hundreds of square miles, the fetch, the uninterrupted wind path, gets long enough to shear particles into the air. Those particles split into two troublemaking sizes. PM10 are coarser, the grit you taste on your teeth. PM25 are fine enough to slip past throat and nose, lodge in lungs, even cross into blood. Metals hitchhike on both. Arsenic doesn't need to be a lot to matter. Chronic exposure at low doses still rewrites risk curves for heart disease, lung function, and cancers. Meanwhile, the biological cover that once helped hold the bed is thinning. Microbialites, the carbonate reefs carpeted with living films, bleach when desiccated and oversalted. In open water, they anchor brine fly larvae and fuel the lake's primary productivity. Expose them, and you don't just lose habitat, you lose a living net that kept sediments from moving. Sustained salinity in the high teens, like we've seen in parts of the South Arm, flips the base of the food web into retreat. Less primary productivity, fewer flies and shrimp, fewer birds, plus more naked mud for the wind. Downwind, the human stories start small and personal. A nurse on the west side keeps painter's tape by the door. When the alert pings, she seals the gap and checks her mom's inhaler. Across town, a refinery worker steps out for a call and starts coughing. He blames the cat at first, then realizes the air tastes metallic. A mom in Rose Park texts her neighbor, "Swap filters after dinner." She's keeping a calendar of brown air days on the fridge now, next to soccer practice, because half the games don't happen anymore. This isn't only an airway problem. Metals don't care about addresses. Dust settles on gardens and playgrounds. It washes into gutters and sifts through window screens. It sits on snow, darkening it, melting it faster, loading one more cycle of exposure into spring runoff. The dose is cumulative. Epidemiologists talk about burden curves and latency. Families talk about headaches, tight chests, and the kid who missed 3 days in April. There's a grim accounting under that. Public health models, tuned on other dust-prone basins and adjusted for metal loads, point to a multi-decade healthcare overhang. More ER visits on storm days, yes, but also long arcs of cardiopulmonary disease showing up in insurance data, disability claims, and mortality statistics. You don't see that in a single clip on the evening news. You see it in hospital budgets and life expectancy maps 10 years from now. Meanwhile, one detail makes this worse: crust memory. A stabilized patch can reseal if left alone, but disturbed fields get easier to lift with each event. Agencies talk about crust stabilization near schools and neighborhoods, sprays, straw checkerboards, planting, but none of that substitutes for water. Without submergence, you're welding shut part of a leaky boat while the hull keeps dropping. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. The plume doesn't respect property lines or income brackets, but exposure isn't equal. Neighborhoods closer to the lake and industrial corridors take the first hit and the thickest load. Purifiers and upgraded HVAC cost money. That turns a geophysical hazard into an equity problem. The dust became a tax with a zip code. You can measure this in lab vials and in lives. Air monitors on storm edges pick up spikes in PM25 and PM10 with detectable arsenic signatures. Clinic logs show clusters on those days, kids, elders, workers with outdoor shifts. Then the wind stops. The sky clears, the invoices don't. And here's the twist that ties chemistry back to the ledger from before. Every exposed acre is future cash flow, just in the wrong direction. Arsenic in the mud isn't a footnote, it's a line item that compounds. The only durable cap is water. Until then, the lake's toxic inventory stays on the shelf, waiting for the next gust to turn numbers into breath. Valuing the invisible, the $2 trillion exposure. Here's where the numbers stop being abstract. Take the dust we just walked through and give it a price. Not a headline, a ledger. Start with health. Arsenic-laced PM2.5 and PM10 don't just spike ER visits on storm days. They load decades of cardiopulmonary disease into insurance pools. Analysts run cohort models. More asthma, COPD, heart attacks, strokes, cancers nudged by chronic exposure. Put a cost on hospitalizations, medications, missed work, early mortality. Discount it forward. It's not a one-time line, it's a long slope, steepening with every exposed acre. Now watch productivity. On brown air days, schools close and parents stay home. Shift workers miss hours. Flights delay or divert. Crews time out. Cargo stacks up. Warehouses on the I-80 and A-15 spines run fewer bays because managers throttle loading when grit seeps in. That downtime ripples through suppliers and customers. You can measure it in hourly wages lost and inventory sitting. Multiply by dozens of events a year, then by years. Property is the quiet amplifier. Buyers don't need a PhD to check air alerts. When dust becomes part of life, demand softens. Appraisals build it in. Cap rates widen by a quarter point, then a half. A place that traded at a premium for views and access starts pricing in filters, sealed windows, and risk. Run a 25–40% decline across the Wasatch Front housing stock in worst-case bands. Suddenly equity vanishes, collateral weakens, and homebuilding pipelines stall. Cities feel it as shrinking assessments and tighter budgets. Industry adds its own columns. The ski economy depends on the snow engine we talked about. Dust on snow knocks reflectivity down, cuts seasons, and forces resorts to burn money on marginal snowmaking that can't outrun warm springs. Hospitality takes the hit next. Mineral operations on the shore throttle when salinity crosses tolerances. Logistics firms model chronic delays into bids. Some sites get passed over. The airport's reputation for reliability, Salt Lake's competitive edge, gets a question mark. Insurers don't debate any of this. They write exclusions. Premiums creep up first, then jump. Some carriers cap dust and wildfire exposure together and walk away from certain zip codes. Deductibles climb. Self-insured employers start paying more for claims tied to respiratory and cardiac issues. Reinsurers bake in climate volatility and raise the floor. Meanwhile, ratings agencies look at municipal bonds. They see higher operating costs, declining tax bases, and long-term health liabilities. Spreads widen. Projects penciled at tight margins no longer clear. Utilities face the dust in a different way. Windborne grit fouls transformers, panels, and intake screens. Solar arrays lose output to soiling and need more washing, using water that's already scarce. Gas plants and refineries struggle with cooling constraints when summer heat and lower water supplies converge. Grid operators plan for brownouts on storm days. Reliability downgrades aren't dramatic, they're expensive. Investors start speaking a new language, air as a liability. Site selectors map prevailing winds and proximity to the playa. ESG slides give way to physical risk memos. Every lease asks about filtration and HVAC retrofits. Developers see their capex rise before a shovel hits dirt. Sealed envelopes, upgraded intakes, on-site air cleaning. Office demand tilts toward buildings that can prove clean air. Remote-first companies take that as permission to leave. Now pull it together in the only tool that treats the future like a bill, net present value. Stack the health burden over 30 years, treatment, lost work, disability. Add property value erosion under dust alert regimes. Layer in industry hits, fewer ski days, constrained mineral revenues, airport disruptions, logistics friction, utility deratings, price insurance shifts, and municipal financing penalties. Put a reasonable discount rate on it. The exposure clears $2 trillion in plausible scenarios, not because of a single cataclysm, but because compounding risk looks small until you sum it. Here's the twist: markets don't wait for consensus. A pension fund doesn't need the legislature to agree before it demands dust-adjusted valuations. A bank committee doesn't need a new law to trim loan-to-value ratios west of the lake. A hedge on municipal paper widens spreads faster than a hearing schedules. That's how money enforces physics. Meanwhile, households adapt first and pay most. HEPA purifiers, MERV upgrades, sealed windows, doctor visits, missed shifts, none of that shows up in GDP cleanly, but it drains savings. Talent follows air, high-skilled workers with options start eyeing other mountain metros. Recruiters notice candidates ghosting after the first dust alert screenshot. HR budgets go up while tax bases thin. City plans for growth meet reality. Retention is cheaper than replacement, but air takes that choice away. People ask if there's a number that turns the tide. There is lake-level targets enforced like debt covenants, because the only durable fix that melts this exposure is inches of water over the playa. Everything else is mitigation. Until elevation returns to a floor that keeps salinity in the 12–16% band and covers the dust engine, the ledger keeps printing. Investors already see it. They're not angry, they're moving. The water cartel, diversions, rights, and growth machines. To see why the ledger keeps bleeding, look upstream, where pipes, canals, and contracts decide who gets water and who breathes dust. A century ago, lawmakers wrote a simple rule for a complex basin: first in time, first in right. Prior appropriations sounded fair: reward the pioneers who dug the first ditches. It calcified into senior claims that still sit atop the river, immune to most drought politics. When the sky withholds, juniors go dry first. The lake isn't a rights holder. It waits at the end of the line. Agriculture carries most of those senior stakes. That's not an accusation, it's history. But history has margins, and alfalfa lives on the thinnest of them. It's a thirsty crop that survives on volume, cut after cut, summer after summer. Here's where things get awkward. A big slice of that alfalfa isn't feeding local cows. It's riding trucks and ships as virtual water, bales compressed into green exports bound for overseas dairies. Water leaves the basin twice, first from the river, then from the economy. Meanwhile, 60% of upstream diversions still go to ag. The lake gets what's left, on years when there is anything left. This would be manageable if the law made space for the public trust the lake represents: air to breathe, birds to migrate, snow to fall. In practice, the trust is a clause, not a valve. Boards and districts guard legacy entitlements because that's their job. A canal doesn't care about a dust alert. It cares about deliveries. The ditch company meeting minutes read like a different planet from a hospital's surge plan, and both are right from where they sit. Municipal growth added its own thirst with a smile. For decades, cities sold lawns as lifestyle and cheap taps as economic development. Subdivisions bloomed where farms once stood, and each new cul-de-sac arrived with sprinklers set to run at dawn. Developers penciled returns on the assumption that water was a fixed input. HOAs codified green without specifying drought-tolerant. Then those choices hardened into pipes, medians, and pools that don't care what the lake looks like in August. Industry came with bigger straws and quieter brochures. Mineral extraction on the lake's edge depends on evaporation, water spread wide and left to the sun until salts and metals concentrate. Refineries and data centers tapped discounted supplies with firm contracts. Evaporation ponds glittered from the air as jobs on the ground. Everyone could point to a balance sheet and show value created. The externalities drifted east on the wind. Now put the incentives under a single light. Senior rights reward you for taking your full allotment. If you conserve, you risk proving you never needed that much. If you fallow, you might invite a neighbor to claim you didn't use it. Municipalities sell growth as revenue, so they issue hookups and count on tomorrow's ratepayers to cover yesterday's pipes. Industrial users sign take or pay agreements to guarantee throughput. No one gets a bonus for leaving water in the river. Every spreadsheet nods at efficiency. Almost none of them reward restraint. Boards protect this because their charters tell them to. Water districts elect directors who promise reliability, not ecological flaws. State engineers administer rules, not aspirations. Legislatures nod toward the public trust, then draft exceptions, pilot programs, and voluntary targets that add up to good press and small savings. It isn't corruption. It's path dependence, the system doing exactly what it was built to do. But there was one problem. The physics changed faster than the contracts. Warmer air pulled more moisture from soil and reservoirs. Inflows dipped below evaporation. The lake crossed thresholds that models warned about. Microbialites died back. Salinity surged into the high teens band where brine shrimp and flies struggle. dust fields widened. And because the legal plumbing routes pain to the end of the line, the lake absorbed it first, then the air, then the people. Here's a micro story that keeps repeating. A farmer with senior rights alfalfa irrigates through July. His margins are thin, his lender expects volume. He's heard about pay for fallow, but the paperwork is slow and the payments uncertain. Downstream, a subdivision waters 3 days a week because the city ordinance still allows it if you go at dawn. Across the lake, evaporation ponds shimmer. The brine operator meets its contractual draw because missing volume means missing payroll. Over the ridge, a data center hums, its cooling loop tuned and permitted. Noon wind picks up. Brown haze walks east. Meanwhile, municipal planners try to thread the needle. They pilot turf buybacks and publish conservation dashboards while approving new plats. One city bans non-functional grass, the next balks after HOA blowback. Regional coordination means meetings, rivers mean movement, and the market keeps sending signals no one's paid to hear. Cap rates widen for dust-prone parcels, insurers tweak deductibles, a corporate site visit ends early when the valley turns sepia. There's a narrow path out of this cartel logic, but it starts with flipping incentives. Make conserved water a protected asset, not a forfeiture trap. Pay growers real money to fallow strategically and switch crops without gambling their deeds. Tie municipal growth to verified water budgets, not aspirations. Link industrial draws to lake-level benchmarks so brine profits depend on brine health. None of that feels like a ribbon cutting. It feels like work. Until then, every new permit chisels another inch off the lake. Senior rights can legally dry the river before it reaches the brine. Lawn permits still get stamped. Evaporation ponds still spread. And Salt Lake City learns to measure prosperity in filters sold and inhalers refilled, while a white crust at the valley's edge waits for the next wind to do the accounting. The snow engine, how the lake makes the mountains. While the dust moves through kitchens and clinics, something quieter is happening above the ridgelines. Cold air sweeps off the desert, skims the lake's open water, picks up heat and moisture, and rises in narrow bands that stack clouds against the Wasatch. Lake effect snow, it's not a postcard trick, it's a machine with settings the lake controls. Lower the water, shrink the fetch, warm the air, and the engine sputters. Keep the water wide, and those cloud streets feed the mountains that feed the valley. Ski towns know this in their bones. A tech in a Park City workshop keeps a coffee tin of snow cores next to the waxed bench. Pull the lid and you see stripes, thin gray bands laid like fingerprints through a winter's worth of storms. He taps one with a screwdriver. Dust, early April, melt followed fast. He shrugs and says what managers say in emails later. We can fight temperature with guns if nights cooperate, but we can't fight a sunburned snowpack. Here's where it gets mechanical. Clean snow bounces most sunlight back to space. Dust on snow darkens the surface, drops albedo, and turns that mirror into a sponge for heat. Studies across the West peg the shift at weeks. In this basin, dust layers have pushed melt roughly 17 days earlier in observed seasons. 17 days isn't trivia. It's a lift's closing weekend, a reservoir's refill window, a river's cool water pulse for fish, and a farmer's planting calendar. Lose those days, and everything downstream runs tight. Meanwhile, the lake is part of the snow recipe itself. Open water feeds the moisture plume. As the shoreline retreats and salinity climbs, more south arm shallows hit saturation, crust over, and sit as bright salt flats that don't evaporate much. Less evaporation means less lake effect fuel. The engine starves twice, first from area, then from dust. That double hit turns a strong March into a thin one, then takes a bite out of April, when the mountains usually bank the season. Resorts try to outrun physics with money. Snowmaking hums at dusk, crews stitch white ribbons across brown hillsides, and accountants pray for inversion nights cold enough to bulk up a base. But dust layers don't care about compressor capacity. A dirty April storm can turn a week of snowmaking into slush by Tuesday. Guests rebook or don't. Hotels discount midweeks. Hourly workers lose shifts and tips. The hit spreads from lift lines to laundries, bars, rental shops, and shuttle operators who start their vans on mornings that never quite fill. Away from the ski map, the impacts compound. Dust-darkened snow sheds early in the backcountry. That means rotten snowpacks sliding sooner, sloughs running on facets, and more shoulder season accidents when people misjudge conditions that used to be reliable. Spring creeks rise fast, peak earlier, then fall to trickles under hotter sun. Reservoir managers chase timing, release too soon and you miss storage, hold too long and you flood a valley that didn't plan for it. On dry years, there isn't a safe move. And there's the wildfire clock. Early melt dries fuels weeks ahead. By July, the shoulder-high grass above the benches bakes to tinder, while afternoon outflows kick up, loading the same PM catalogs we measure on lakebed dust. Smoke stacks with dust on bad days. ERs don't ask whether the PM came from cheatgrass or playa, lungs don't care. Engineers reading snow pillows see all this as inputs and outputs. A reservoir graph sags, a hydro plant schedules fewer peak hour runs, a city's summer watering window stretches into a heat dome that sits over the valley like a lid. Then the albedo math shows up in ordinances, odd-even watering, fines that don't cover the inspector's salary, appeals from residents who swear their lawn is xeriscaped, except for their kids' patch of green. Here's a human loop that ties it back to inches on the lake. A ski tech logs another dust band. A resort manager cuts part-time staff a week early. A server loses shifts and stares at rent. The resort delays capex on a lift upgrade. The county's lodging tax misses projections. The city trims its trail crew. By August, with less runoff banked, the lake sits lower, the dust fields wider. The next winter arrives with the engine detuned again. People ask if cloud seeding helps. Sure, on the margins, planes fly, silver iodide drifts, a few % more snow might fall in cold storms that still have the right structure. But seeding can't create open water fetch, and it can't bleach dust out of a March gale. The cheapest water is the water not wasted in November lawns and July alfalfa. The best snow insurance is inches of lake. So the machine we sell to the world, the greatest snow on earth, runs on lake geometry and dust we control by policy, not by prayer. Cover the playa and keep salinity in the band where life and mixing work, and the clouds remember their job. Leave it exposed, and the mountains learn a new calendar. The thresholds when a lake becomes a desert.